Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have a special guest. He's the author of the book Live Like a Guide Dog, True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs. No other than Mr. Michael Hingson. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Mike, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. So I am Mike Hingson. I have been blind my entire life. I've been pretty visible because I was in the World Trade Center on September 11th, and I survived um, with my guide dog at the time, Roselle. And ever since, the media had gotten my story and wanted to publish a lot about it, which they did. And then people started calling and saying, "Gee, would you allow us to hire you to come and tell us what we should learn from September 11th, the lessons we should learn, what should we learn about leadership, and what other things do you have to tell us?" And so I've been a keynote speaker for the last 23 plus years. I am now using my eighth guide dog, Alamo. In 2011, we published my first book, which I wrote with a lady named Susie Flory. That is called Thunderdog, the story of a blind man, his guide dog, and the triumph of trust at ground zero. And that became a number one New York Times best-selling book. Larry King wrote the foreword for it, which we were very blessed about. We wrote a children's book with a lady named Jeanette Hanscom at the end of 2013. It was published. But then when the pandemic began, I realized that although I've been talking a lot about the whole issue of escaping and being focused and not panicking, I've not taught people how they can learn to control fear, because in reality, you can. When things happen to us, we become so fearful, we become so afraid, and we don't know what to do because we're, as I would put it, blinded or paralyzed by fear. And the result is that we just freeze. The fact is, fear is something that you can control. You can learn to use it as a powerful tool to help you and keep you focused, which is what I had learned and done on September 11th, but really didn't think about it. It was a mindset, and it clicked in on September 11th, and all went well. It was many years before I realized all of that. But then when the pandemic began, as I said, I realized I hadn't taught people how to do that. So I began writing a book about it with a lady named Carrie Wyatt Kent. And last year in August of 2024, Live Like a Guide Dog, True Stories from a Blind Man, His Guide Dogs, and the Triumph of Trust. I'm sorry, Live Like a Guide Dog, True Stories from a Blind Man, His Dogs, and His Dogs about um, being brave, overcoming adversity, and moving forward in faith was published. So it is now out there. That is my third book, and it is available for people to be able to get and read. And I hope they will and learn that you can control fear. And we can talk about all sorts of lessons that I learned and that we talk about in the book. But that's a little bit about me.
Mr. Michael Hingson, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. Hoping for more empowering books like this. So, what's inspired you to write Live Like a Guide Dog?
The best thing I can say is I realized that I wasn't teaching people how to deal with fear, and I wanted to. And it's not like it's magic. It's not like it's hard. It does take work. Um, we're afraid of so many things in our lives. And what we never learn, we don't seem to learn, is that in reality, we should just focus on the things over which we really have control. We don't do that. We want to fix everything. We want to control everything. We don't have control over everything. We have control over things that directly affect us, but we don't have control over all the rest. We still worry about it, and that creates fear. Uh, We what if everything to death, and we need to learn not to do that. We need to learn how to focus our lives on what we can do and let the rest alone. And that's something I even learned in the World Trade Center. Focus on what you can control and don't worry about the rest, because all it'll do is drive you crazy. And so
Yes,
that's what we worry about, and that's what we've got to stop doing. So I wrote Live Like a Guide Dog using lessons I learned from my various dogs. So for example, after September 11th, I contacted the school where I got my dog and I asked them, how is that how is the World Trade Center going to affect Roselle? And the veterinarian said, well, was Roselle really threatened directly in any way? And I said, no, she wasn't. He said, then there's your answer. Dogs don't do what if. Dogs live in the moment. And the reality is we should learn to live more in the moment. Oh, there's nothing wrong with planning, but when you fear, when you learn to fear and you let that overwhelm you, that's not planning, that's not dealing with things, and that's worrying about all the things that you don't need to worry about. And Live Like a
definitely.
Guide Dog teaches people how to change that habit and that mindset.
Definitely. Totally agree. People, Mr. Michael Hingson is a New York Times bestselling author. So, how does your relationship between your guide dogs exemplify trust and partnership?
Working with a guide dog is developing a team. You need to understand what a guide dog does and what a guide dog doesn't do.
Yes,
People view blind people as incapable. They view us as not able to do anything because we can't see. That is wrong. The fact of the matter is, blind people can do the same things that sighted people can do. We may not do them the same way. We may use different tools and different techniques, but it doesn't mean that we can't do them. So, for example, I happen to use a guide dog. The dog's job is to make sure that I walk safely. The dog's job is not to know where I want to go and how to get there. That's my job. And I know how to do that just like you know how to do that. And now, today, especially with all the technology that we have available, it's a lot easier to do. But I learn what I need to know about going somewhere and traveling around. I can use my iPhone, which has accessibility built into it. Every single iPhone in the world has accessibility built into it, as long as the apps take advantage of that. But I can use maps, I can use Google Maps, I can use GPS technology on my phone, and I can find out the things that I need to know about traveling. The dog's job is to make sure that we walk safely. When we get to a curb, the dog stops. If we get to stairs or an open manhole or whatever, the dog stops and waits for a command from me. We function as a team, and one of the most important things that I've learned over the years working with 8 guide dogs is it is a team. I'm the team leader. The dog wants to know what the rules are. The dog wants to let me be the team leader. But I also know that there are times that the dog has to take the initiative, like stopping at curbs. And if I tell the dog to go forward and the dog doesn't go, then I have to assume that there must be a reason for that. Like there's a hybrid or a quiet car coming down the street and the dog doesn't want to get hit and doesn't want me to get hit, so the dog won't go. I have to respect the dog's decisions in that regard. So we work together. And that's what teamwork is really all about.
definitely. So, what specific challenges did you face as a blind person, and how do the guide dogs help overcome them?
Well, the biggest challenge I face is that people don't understand that blindness isn't the problem. It's their misconceptions and attitudes about blindness that tend to really be the problem. And people think that it's always the dog. I've been in hotels, for example, and I will tell my dog to turn left because I know that there's a turn coming up and I want to turn left. And people just say, "Isn't it amazing how that dog knows when to turn left? He was able to turn that blind man to go left." I was telling the dog to go left. They weren't paying attention to that. But but the fact is that people don't understand that we have different techniques, but we can do the same thing. Eyesight is not the only game in town. Let me put it another way. In 1878, Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb. So
Yes.
what is the light bulb? The light bulb is a way to give you light on demand so that you can see in the dark. But if the lights go out, if there's a power failure or whatever and you don't immediately have a light source available, you are in the dark and you're not capable or you generally aren't capable of functioning because you can't see what to do or where to go. That's your disability, and it is as much a disability as me being blind, or it's as much an ability, however you choose to view it. But the fact of the matter is, because we have so much light on demand from electric lights and so on, your disability is mostly covered up, whereas mine is not. I don't care whether the lights go out. I can still get along just fine. I've done that many times. We all have different disabilities, but a disability is not a lack of ability. A disability is a characteristic that we all exhibit, but we exhibit it in different ways depending on who we are and what our gifts are and what our challenges are. And so the biggest challenge to me is that people won't accept that I may be just as capable as they are. I have a master's degree in physics from the University of California at Irvine. I'm a member of Phi Beta Kappa, the Honor Society, the Education Honor Society. I have a secondary teaching credential. I've been to a number of countries in my life, traveling and speaking. This last October, I was in London for a conference on resilience. I use a computer. I do the same things that everyone else does. I don't necessarily do them the same way, but I do them. I was married for 40 years. My wife, Karen, was in a wheelchair her whole life. She passed away in November of 2022. So now, once again, I'm living alone. I do my own cooking. I feed the dog. We have a cat. I feed the cat. Cat likes to eat a lot more than sometimes I let her, but
Yes.
you know, the fact of the matter is that we all have challenges, we all have gifts, and we should respect each other's gifts and help when we see people with challenges. But don't assume that my challenges make me incapable just because I happen to be blind.
Mr. Michael Hingson, thank you so much again for your talents that you're sharing to the world. You make us inspired. What lessons about bravery can readers from your book Live Like a Guide Dog?
Everyone has the ability to be brave. Everyone has the capability of being brave. Everyone has the ability to learn to control fear, but we have to exercise our minds and teach our minds to do that. So, for example, at the end of every day, one of the things that I think people should do is take a few moments as they're getting ready to fall asleep and just reflect on what happened today. What worked? What didn't work? Why didn't it work? What can I do about it? If I can do anything about it. And if I can't do anything about it, then don't worry about it. You need to recognize you can't do something about that, so drop it. Otherwise, it's just going to eat at you. But you can learn how to deal with the things that maybe gave you a challenge in the course of the day. And you can even ask yourself, why was I afraid of that? I don't believe in the concept of failure. I believe that sometimes things don't work because we didn't do something right, perhaps. But failure really is an end, and it's not true. The fact is that we can learn that when things go wrong, think about it and find out in your own mind what you can do better next time so that you won't have that same failure. I love to tell people that contrary to thinking you're your own worst critic when you're abusing yourself because you don't do something right or whatever, realize that in reality, what you are is your own best teacher. You can teach yourself if you take the time to stop, reflect, think back, and look at everything that happens to you and use that time to understand what you need to do to make it better next time. And if you work at that daily, if you work at that all the time, you'll find that it won't be too long before you won't be nearly as fearful and you'll be able to figure things out a lot more effectively than you did before.
100% agree. Mr. Michael, so what are some of the most memorable or life changing moments shared between you and your guide dogs?
Well, certainly one is the World Trade Center, and the fact that Roselle and I worked so well together. As I say, the World Trade Center is the validation of everything that I'm saying to you about how I live my life and what works and what doesn't work. People say to me all the time, well, they ask me, well, did you know what happened in the World Trade Center? And I said, not while we were in the building and going downstairs, and they would say, "Well, of course you didn't know because you couldn't see it." That's the stupid thing that people say. Why? We were on the 78th floor on the south side of the building. The airplane hit on roughly the 96th floor on the north side of the building. The last time I checked, no one knew how to see through 18 floors of steel and concrete and rebar and so on. No one, as we were going down the stairs, knew what happened, at least no one near me. All those sighted people didn't know because they hadn't seen it, they couldn't see it, and we couldn't know what had occurred. I didn't really know until after both towers had collapsed and I called my wife on the phone and she told me how two airplanes had been hijacked and crashed into the towers, one to the Pentagon and a fourth at that time was still missing over Pennsylvania. But the fact of the matter is, it wasn't a blindness issue. It was really a mindset issue that clicked in for me that helped me do so well. And so I think about that regularly. Um, I have learned all about teamwork from my guide dogs. I've learned a lot more about how to make a team, how to keep a good team, how to communicate with people from learning to do that with a creature that doesn't speak the same language or think the same way I do at all, namely a dog. I've learned how to build teams with dogs and I've learned how to build teams with people. And I can do that because of the lessons I learned from my dogs. I believe that dogs are great teachers if we allow ourselves to learn from them and don't assume they're just dumb animals because they're
They are
not in
not.
any way, shape, or form. And
Yes.
so I've learned a lot from working with my dogs. As I tell people, I've learned a lot more from working with 8 guide dogs, and then my wife had a very bright service dog. I've learned more from working with all of those dogs and learning from those dogs than I ever learned from Brian Tracy, Ken Blanchard, all of those people, all of the motivational people, and so on. Because with the dog, it's real, and what you see is what you get. Tony Robbins the same way. I learn a lot more from my dogs than I've learned from all those people.
Certainly. I think dogs, or not I think, for sure they have higher emotional intelligence than people right now. So, Mr. Michael, how does the book highlight the emotional bond between humans and animals?
Well, everything in the book is all about the emotional bond that we develop. Dogs, I do believe, love unconditionally, but I do not believe that dogs trust unconditionally. But the difference between dogs and people is that unless a dog has been incredibly abused by someone, which doesn't happen fortunately often, if a dog is just treated reasonably well, the dog will be more open to trust than people. People are always wondering, well, what's the hidden agenda? What's this person going to do to me if I trust them? We don't tend to be open to trust anymore. Rather than saying, I'd like to trust you, earn my trust, just like I want you to earn my trust. And that's what happens with dogs. When I work with each guide dog, we have to start at the beginning and build up a teaming relationship. And I think it takes a good year to build that relationship. But I've been able to do it with 8 guide dogs. And I believe that that has taught me how to do it better with people as well.
Yes.
So the bottom line is that trust is extremely important, and we should be more open to trust. I'm not saying that we trust people necessarily absolutely right from the outset, but we should be open to trust and and convey that we want to develop a trusting relationship. And if people do that, great. Um, and if somebody betrays our trust, then we have to move on from that. But by the same token, don't let it close you to the idea of trust, which is something we do way too often.
Yes, move on and let it go, people. Like the dog. So, Mr. Mike, what would be your advice for those people out there want to write their novel, their stories?
My
Or
advice is to do it. The fact is, I think everyone has a story to tell. I have a podcast. It's called Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And the purpose of the podcast is to give people the opportunity to tell their stories, to come on and we talk about their lives. I want them to talk about the things that they want to talk about, and I have a way to learn that from them. and they come on the podcast. And when they do, what we do is we talk about their stories. We learn what things they did that are unstoppable and how they're unstoppable. We learn how they have overcome adversity, how they've adapted and worked in the world. And so we just published, or we're publishing tomorrow, episode 305. We started it in August of 2021, and in like August of 2022, we started doing two episodes a week, and it's a lot of fun. It's available anywhere podcasts are available, and as well as on YouTube. Have a lot of fun with it, and
Yes.
I think that I've learned a lot. And as I tell people, if I'm not learning at least as much as listeners, then I'm not doing my job well. We only have one rule on the podcast: that you cannot come on the podcast if you don't obey this rule, and that is you got to have fun. And
Yes.
as long as you're
Fun,
going to have fun,
fun.
it's a good thing. Yeah, that's the only rule.
Fun, fun, fun under the sun, as they
That's it.
said.
So we're
So,
always looking for guests. If you want to be a guest, I'd love to talk with you about it. But anyone else who wants to come on, it's Unstoppable Mindset. You can go to Michael Hingson, MichaelHingson.com/podcast, and there's a contact form there. I'd love to hear from you.
definitely. Let's support Mr. Michael Hingson. So, Mr. Michael, what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing and podcasting and any activities that you're doing right now?
Well, and as I said, I am still and mostly do a lot of public speaking. My goal is to inspire people, to teach people, to show them that disability isn't a lack of ability and that we all have gifts and that we should all respect each other's gifts. That's one of my major goals. Um, I want to meet more people, get more people on the podcast, and have fun with them on the podcast, um, and learn from them. I want to always work at learning. I think that's very important. So, as I said, I want to learn at least as much as those who listen to the podcast.
Definitely. So, Mr. Michael, I'm inviting you again to come back on Book 101 Review and let's talk about your first book if you are interested.
We could come back and talk about Thunderdog, sure.
Yes, please. So, how does the book Live Like a Dog celebrate the intelligence and dedication of guide dogs?
It's all about that. It celebrates the intelligence of dogs and the things that dogs get that we don't get, like not doing what if all the time,
Yes,
living in the moment, analyzing and moving forward. And um, and the book tells my stories with all 8 of my guide dogs, so people will learn a lot about how I've used guide dogs since 1964 and all the fun and the wonderful adventures and stories that we've had together. And I think that's very important. Dogs are wonderful creatures to have around.
yes. I hope all people right now living at the moment, for sure, there is no problem. they
Right.
they let it go very fast, just like the dog. Let it go,
Let
people,
it
and
go.
live with the
Yep.
moment. So to wrap up our discussion, Mr. Michael, what lasting impact did you hope the book will have on readers regarding disability awareness and animal companionship?
Well, I hope that the most important impact is that people will learn how to control fear and not be so afraid in their lives. And they can use the lessons that I learned with 8 guide dogs and my wife's service dog, Fantasia, to do that. I want people to understand more about blindness and blind people, that we're just as capable as they are, and we're just as human as they are. And that the dog's job is to be part of a team of 2 to accomplish the tasks. And if people will understand that, it'll make it a much easier world for me, and it'll make it a better world for everyone, which is what I would really like to see.
Mr. Michael Hingson, New York Times best-selling author. Thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. And we are looking for more and more empowering books like this. So can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Sure. Again, um, they can go to michaelhingson.com they can go to michaelhingson.com/podcast. And I hope that they will want to come on as guests. If they are interested in finding out a way for me to come and speak to them, they can email me at speaker@michaelhingson, michaelhingson.com. And I'd love to talk with them about that as well. And again, I'd love to invite you on the podcast. So if you'd like to do that, we can set that up.
Definitely, I will come and talk about everything under the sun.
Oh, good.
So,
And on the other side of the sun as well.
yes, of course. Mr. Michael, we inspired of what you're doing. I hope you will continue doing it and to inspire billions of people on earth.
Thank you. I hope so.
So, Mr. Mike Kinson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having us.
Modicom people, see you soon.